phone buzzed on the wooden nightstand, its glow slicing through the midnight stillness. Emma thought it was just another notification, but the message preview burned her eyes. Mark said, "Don't worry, she's asleep. I'll come soon." Emma's hands trembled as silence swallowed her. Her heart pounded louder than the ticking clock on the wall. Emma whispered, "No, this can't be real." Memories of laughter and promises came crashing down. She wanted to believe it was a mistake, but the words replayed in her mind endlessly. Her throat tightened and her chest ached with betrayal. Tears blurred her sight, but the words on the screen stood sharp. She had ignored the hints, the excuses, the late nights. Now, truth slammed into her like a storm. The room felt smaller, suffocating her with lies. She clenched the phone, shaking, unable to breathe. "I've been living blind," she thought. Mark's betrayal shattered everything. Emma stared into the darkness, her chest hollow, as if her heart had been stolen. She whispered to herself, "How long has this been going on?" Every second became heavier, pressing her deeper into despair. She replayed Mark's excuses about late nights and sudden meetings. "And," Emma said, "I trusted every word. I was blind." She shook her head, unable to understand how she had ignored the cracks in their life. Silence pressed against her like a heavy blanket, suffocating her hope. She wanted to scream, to confront, but fear of the truth froze her. She thought, "If I ask, I'll hear the answer I can't bear." Tears rolled, but her body felt numb. The walls of the bedroom became cold witnesses to her unraveling, as if even they judged her naive trust. She whispered, "I can't unsee this. My world is broken." She realized that the betrayal was not a sudden wound, but a long hidden rot she had refused to see. Emma buried her face in her hands, her fingers trembling. Her heart screamed questions she could never ask aloud. She remembered Mark's smile, the warmth of his hand, the lies hidden beneath it all. Emma said, "You promised forever, but forever meant nothing to you." Her body shuddered, anger and grief tearing her apart. She wanted to tear the phone in half, but it felt like a chain keeping her tied to betrayal. The echoes of laughter at dinner, the warmth of shared secrets, turned into sharp knives piercing her soul. She whispered, "I should have known." Every flashback twisted like a dagger, turning love into poison. Emma felt both lost child and broken woman at once, trapped in a nightmare painted with memories. Her breathing slowed as numbness settled, like her body decided to shield her heart from feeling more. Emma remembered Mark saying, "You're the only one I'll ever love." The words echoed now like a cruel joke. She whispered, "How easily you lied." She wiped her face roughly, hating the tears that betrayed her strength. Her gaze drifted to the nightstand, where the phone glowed like a silent monster. Emma thought, "Do I confront him, or stay silent and break piece by piece?" She rose slightly, but the weight of uncertainty pulled her back. Her mind painted images of Mark in someone else's arms, and her chest burned with rage. She whispered, "You've destroyed me." The silence screamed louder than any confrontation could. Emma lay back slowly, staring at the ceiling, her eyes swollen and red. The fan above spun lazily, mocking her stillness. She whispered, "I can't escape this pain." She remembered Mark's gentle touches, once comforting, now poisonous memories. She thought, "The man I love has killed me with lies." Her body ached, as if every muscle carried betrayal's weight. She clutched the pillow beside her, pretending it was armor against despair. Her voice broke, "Why wasn't I enough?" The night stretched endlessly, trapping her inside a reality she could never undo. The phone's glow faded, but the truth had already scorched her soul. The following days were a blur. Emma moved through life like a ghost, floating between numbness and a raw, gnawing emptiness. She couldn't escape the feeling that every moment she spent with Mark was a lie. Her mind raced with questions. How could she have been so blind? She had missed the subtle shifts, the quiet detachment. He had become a stranger long before the message revealed the truth. Emma said, "I thought I knew him. I thought we had something real." But now, she was left wondering if the love she felt was ever real, or just a perfect illusion. She replayed every conversation, every laugh they shared, trying to find the cracks that had always been there. It wasn't until the betrayal was out in the open that she understood just how deeply the lies had been buried. She wanted to scream, but the silence inside her was louder than any words. Days passed, and the betrayal festered in her mind. Emma kept asking herself, why didn't I see this coming? One evening, Emma found herself sitting at the dinner table alone, staring at the empty chair where Mark usually sat. The silence felt louder than it had ever been before. The absence of his presence was a constant reminder of what had been stolen from her. She thought about the promises they made, the future they spoke of, and realized how easily those words had been washed away by his deceit. Emma's eyes welled up as the memories of their best moments together collided with the reality of his betrayal. How could he do this to me? She whispered. The pain was almost too much to bear, yet it burned with a bitter intensity that felt real and undeniable. The betrayal had taken root in her soul, and every time she thought of Mark, it twisted deeper. She couldn't escape the anger that surged within her. She had trusted him with everything, and now, all she had were shattered pieces of a life she thought she knew. Emma was no longer sure who the man she loved was. Days turned into weeks, and Emma's mind became a constant battle of denial and acceptance. Every interaction with Mark felt suffocating. His attempts to reach her, to apologize, felt hollow, as though they were words spoken by a stranger. Emma couldn't understand how he could act as though nothing had changed. How dare he act like nothing happened, she thought. She found herself questioning every moment, every touch, every word he had ever said. She began distancing herself, not just emotionally, but physically, keeping a cold, unspoken distance between them. His presence in the house became a reminder of her loss, her inability to trust the one person she once relied on. Each time he tried to talk to her, Emma couldn't help but feel a mix of anger and pity. She wondered if she was being unfair, but the thought of forgiveness felt impossible. The betrayal was a scar that wouldn't fade, and Mark's face only reminded her of it. The confrontation came when Emma could no longer stand the silence. One evening, after another of Mark's hollow apologies, Emma couldn't hold back anymore. "How long, Mark? How long were you lying to me?" she demanded. His face shifted, and for the first time, she saw a flicker of guilt, but it was too late. Emma wasn't looking for excuses. She didn't want apologies. She wanted the truth. The painful, ugly truth. "You've shattered everything," she said. "All the trust, all the love. It's gone." Mark's attempts to speak were met with Emma's steady, unwavering gaze. "I deserve better than this," she said, her voice breaking slightly, but her resolve stronger than ever. The pain of it all was unbearable, but at that moment, she knew she was done. She couldn't stay in this fractured version of a life. Mark's voice softened, and for a brief moment, Emma felt a pang of sorrow for him. But then she remembered the lies, the betrayal, and the trust that had been shattered forever. The silence that followed the confrontation was deafening. Mark left the house that night, and Emma was left alone, the weight of the last words hanging in the air. "You've shattered everything," she whispered to herself again. She stood by the window, staring out at the world she no longer felt a part of. Her heart felt as if it had been torn out, but something else had begun to take root inside her, a sense of clarity. Emma realized that this was the moment she needed to reclaim herself. I know, it's a reclaim herself. She wasn't just the victim of betrayal, she was stronger than that. "I will rebuild," she thought. The pain was still there, raw and unhealed, but Emma felt a small spark of hope flicker within her. It wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something new. She would heal. She would be whole again. She wasn't sure how yet, but this was the first step. The days that followed were filled with unease, each one dragging Emma deeper into a haze of confusion. She could no longer ignore the whispers in her mind, the ones telling her that Mark's betrayal wasn't an isolated event. The more she thought about it, the more it became clear. He had been slipping away for longer than she had realized. Mark's late nights, his sudden disappearances, the way he no longer looked at her the same way, all of it added up. Emma wondered how she could have been so blind. Was she too trusting? Too naive? The words echoed in her mind like a broken record. But it wasn't just Mark's actions that hurt her. It was the realization that she had ignored every warning sign, every feeling of discomfort. She had buried her doubts, convinced herself everything was fine, because she didn't want to face the possibility that her world was crumbling. She was angry at herself for not listening to the whispers in her own heart. She was angry at Mark for making her doubt her instincts. And now, she was angry at the lies that had consumed her life. Emma's suspicions grew with every passing day. Mark continued to return home late, always with an excuse, always with a half-hearted smile. But Emma saw through it now. She no longer believed the stories he told. One evening, while Mark was in the bathroom, Emma went through his phone. She didn't want to do it. She knew it was a betrayal of trust, but her instincts told her that the truth was hiding within that device. Her hands shook as she scrolled through the messages, feeling the heat rise in her chest with every word she read. There it was, clear as day. Messages exchanged between Mark and someone she knew. Emma's breath caught in her throat, and she felt the floor beneath her legs begin to tremble. The betrayal was right in front of her, and it felt like a sickening punch to the gut. How long had this been going on? How many times had Mark lied to her? She couldn't hold back the tears any longer. Her heart broke, not just for what Mark had done, but for the person she had become in the process, someone willing to live in denial just to avoid facing the truth. That night, Emma couldn't sleep. The weight of the truth pressed down on her chest, making it hard to breathe. She tossed and turned, her mind replaying every conversation, every moment with Mark. She remembered the times they had laughed together, the way he would brush her hair out of her face, the moments when they were so connected. All of it felt like a lie now. How could she have been so blind? She kept asking herself the same question over and over. And yet, no answer came. It was as if the truth had been hiding in plain sight, and she had been too afraid to see it. Emma sat up in bed, staring at the phone in her hands. The messages were still there, painfully clear, undeniable. Her chest ached with grief and anger, but there was a small part of her that felt relief too. At least now she knew. She wasn't crazy. She wasn't imagining things. The betrayal was real, and it had been there all along. Emma felt the urge to confront Mark, to ask him why. But even as she thought about it, a part of her hesitated. What if the answer was worse than she could imagine? The confrontation came without warning. Emma had spent the entire day thinking, wondering what to say, how to approach Mark. By the time he arrived home, the decision had been made. She couldn't wait any longer. The truth had to come out. Mark walked through the door, a casual smile on his face, but Emma was already standing there, her face pale, her eyes burning with a mixture of anger and pain. "We need to talk," she said, her voice steady despite the storm brewing inside her. Mark paused, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. His smile faded as he looked at her. "About what?" he asked, though Emma could see the unease in his eyes. "About everything," she replied, her voice quiet but firm. She held up his phone, the messages still displayed on the screen. "You lied to me, Mark. For how long?" Mark's face went ashen, and for a moment, Emma saw the guilt that had been hiding behind his carefully crafted mask. He opened his mouth to speak, but Emma raised a hand, silencing him. "I don't want your excuses. I want the truth." The silence after Emma's words was suffocating. Mark stood there, unable to meet her eyes. His hands were trembling, and his lips parted as though he wanted to speak, but couldn't find the words. Emma's heart raced, and she could feel her anger building, rising up like a tidal wave. "Why, Mark?" she asked, her voice shaking but determined. "Why did you do this to me?" Mark finally spoke, his voice low and broken. "I don't know. I didn't mean to hurt you." Emma's laugh was sharp, bitter. "You didn't mean to hurt me? How do you explain all the lies then?" She felt a rush of adrenaline, an urgent need to release all the pain she had been holding in. "You think this is just about you, don't you? About your guilt? What about me? What about the trust you destroyed?" Mark opened his mouth again, but no words came out. Emma shook her head. "I deserve better than this." And with those words, she turned and walked away, her body tense with the rawness of the moment. She didn't have all the answers, but she knew one thing for sure. This was the end. The revelation hit Emma like a freight train. She had uncovered the truth, and yet it was even worse than she could have imagined. Mark had been seeing someone else, someone she knew, her best friend, Lily. The realization left her breathless, frozen in disbelief. How could they both betray her like this? She had trusted Lily, confided in her. And now this? Emma felt a deep, searing pain in her chest, the kind that only comes when the people you love most destroy you. She thought back to the times when Lily had comforted her, listened to her vent about Mark, pretending to be the supportive friend. The betrayal felt so much deeper now, the wound more jagged. She thought, how long have they been seeing each other? Was I just the fool in their game? Emma felt the walls closing in, the room spinning as she clutched the phone tighter in her hands. She wanted to scream, to confront them both, but the words wouldn't come. She felt like she was drowning, suffocating under the weight of this cruel twist of fate. "How could they do this to me?" she whispered through clenched teeth. The weight of the truth didn't lift the pain, it only intensified it. Emma spent the next few days in a fog of anger and sorrow. The betrayal by Mark and Lily felt like a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. Every time she closed her eyes, their faces haunted her. She had shared her most intimate moments with both of them, never once questioning their loyalty. Now, everything felt tainted, as though the very foundation of her life had been built on lies. "What did I do to deserve this?" she thought as she stared blankly out of the window. The anger inside her was growing, bubbling beneath the surface. She wanted to confront Lily, to confront Mark, but every time she thought about it, the rage inside her consumed her. Emma's hands trembled as she replayed the moments with both of them in her mind. Every smile, every gesture, now felt like a cruel joke. She was sick of being the victim. The betrayal had destroyed her, but she wouldn't let it define her. She had to find the strength to face them, to face the truth, no matter how painful it was. Confrontation happened 2 days later. Emma called Lily, her heart pounding in her chest as she dialed the number. She was shaking, unsure of how to start, but the moment the phone rang, she knew there was no turning back. The lie was out in the open, and now it was time to confront it head-on. "Lily," Emma said, her voice steady, "I know about you and Mark." There was a long pause on the other end, and Emma felt her heart beat faster with every passing second. "How long, Lily?" she asked, her voice cracking. "How long have you been lying to me?" Lily's response was weak, stumbling over her words. "I'm so sorry, Emma. I never meant for it to happen." But the apology felt hollow, empty. Emma was beyond anger now. She was numb, disconnected from the situation. "Sorry," Emma repeated, almost laughing. "Is that all you have to say?" The betrayal was so much more than just a broken relationship. It was the destruction of everything she thought she knew. She couldn't comprehend how this had happened, how two people she trusted could have done this to her. It wasn't just about the affair. It was about the trust, the friendship, everything they had stolen from her. The conversation with Lily ended without closure, just empty apologies and awkward silences. Emma felt no relief, no sense of justice. She hung up the phone, staring at it in her hands, as if expecting the device to give her the answers she needed. It didn't. Mark had left a message too, but Emma couldn't bring herself to listen to it. She didn't need to hear him apologize. There was nothing he could say that would change what had already happened. He had betrayed her, just like Lily. Emma sat in the dimly lit room, the silence pressing in around her. Her anger was a simmering pit inside her, but there was no place for it to go. She didn't want revenge. She didn't want to destroy them. She just wanted peace. "What do I do now?" she wondered aloud, her voice echoing in the empty room. She had to make a decision. She could let this destroy her, or she could take control and move on. But moving on didn't feel possible, not yet. The betrayal had shaken her to her core, and she needed time to heal. Emma finally stood up, taking a deep breath. She wasn't going to let this define her. She was stronger than that. Days passed, and Emma found herself in the midst of a quiet storm. She didn't seek out Mark, didn't look for Lily. She needed to process everything, to find herself again. She felt the weight of the betrayal lifting, slowly but surely, replaced with something new, an understanding of her own strength. She wasn't going to let them break her. Emma spent more time with her family, her true friends, the ones who had never betrayed her. She began to rebuild, brick by brick, her confidence, her self-worth. One afternoon, while walking alone in the park, Emma finally realized that she could move on, that she could be whole again. The road wouldn't be easy, but it would be hers to walk. She had learned to trust herself again, to listen to the quiet voice inside her that had been drowned out by the noise of Mark and Lily's lies. Emma smiled softly, a sense of peace washing over her. "I'm going to be okay," she thought. "I'm going to be better than okay." The air in the room felt heavy, thick with unspoken words. Emma had spent days trying to rebuild her sense of self, trying to reclaim the pieces of her heart Mark had broken. She thought she had done it. She thought she was ready. But when Mark showed up at her door, the moment she had dreaded for so long arrived. He stood there, his eyes full of guilt, regret, and something else. Fear. His hands were shaking, his usual confidence long gone. Emma stared at him for a long moment, her chest tight, her emotions in turmoil. Mark opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out at first. He only stood there, his gaze pleading, as though she could save him from the mess he had made. Emma felt a mixture of rage and sorrow flood her chest. "You have no right to come here," she said coldly, the words cutting through the silence like a knife. "You've destroyed everything we had, and now you expect forgiveness?" Mark's face fell as he tried again to explain, to apologize. But Emma wasn't listening anymore. The trust was gone. The love was gone. What was left between them was just a hollow shell of a life that no longer had meaning. Mark continued to apologize, his voice cracking with emotion, but Emma couldn't listen to him anymore. The words felt empty, meaningless. She had heard them all before, empty promises, regrets, and excuses. "I'm sorry, Emma. Please, I never meant to hurt you," Mark pleaded. But Emma's heart no longer beat for him. It beat for herself, for the person she was becoming. "You don't get to decide that anymore," Emma said quietly, but with a weight that made the words feel like a declaration. Mark's eyes softened, and he reached out, his fingers brushing the air between them, as if he could touch her heart again. "Please, let me explain. Let me make it right," he begged. But Emma shook her head, a tear escaping her eye despite her determination to remain strong. She had waited too long for the truth. She had waited too long for him to love her the way she deserved. But he never would. Not now, not after everything. "I deserve more than this," she whispered, the words a painful reminder of what she had lost. Mark's voice cracked with desperation, but Emma didn't flinch. She had heard enough. She had given him every chance, every piece of her heart, and he had squandered it. She thought about all the nights she had waited for him to come home, all the times she had tried to ignore the little lies, the secrets that piled up between them, the tears she had shed, the pain she had endured. None of it was worth it. "I gave you everything, Mark," Emma said, her voice low but unwavering, "and you threw it all away for something meaningless." She paused, letting her words settle into the thick silence between them. "I loved you with everything I had, but now I'm done. This ends tonight." Mark stood there motionless, as though the air had been sucked out of him. Emma could see the realization dawning on him, the understanding that there was no going back. He had lost her, lost everything they had built together, and no amount of begging would change that. The silence that followed was deafening. Mark opened his mouth to speak again, but Emma raised her hand to stop him. She wasn't interested in hearing more lies, more explanations. "Don't," she said, her voice steady. "You had your chance, Mark, and you blew it." The weight of those words hung in the air, suffocating him. He stood there, unable to respond, his face a mixture of disbelief and regret. Emma could see that he was struggling, still hoping that somehow he could fix it, make it right. But Emma had already made her decision. "I can't do this anymore," she whispered, more to herself than to him. She stepped back, closing the door between them with a finality that echoed in her heart. As she turned away, Emma felt a strange sense of peace wash over her. It wasn't the peace of forgiveness. It wasn't the peace of closure. It was the peace of letting go. For the first time in a long time, Emma felt like she could breathe again. Emma spent the following weeks focused on herself, on healing, on rediscovering who she was without Mark, without the weight of betrayal crushing her every day. She began spending more time with the people who truly cared for her, reconnecting with old friends and family. For the first time, she realized that she had been so consumed by her relationship that she had lost sight of her own needs, her own desires. Slowly, she started to rebuild. She took long walks, meditated, read books she had always wanted to read. It was a process, but she was making progress. And one day, as she sat in the park, watching the sun set, Emma realized something she hadn't fully understood before. The betrayal had not destroyed her. It had awakened her. She was no longer a woman defined by the lies and pain of her past. She was free. "I'm stronger than I ever knew," Emma thought, a smile tugging at the corner of her lips. It had been weeks since Emma had closed the door on Mark and Lily, and yet the emotional scars remained. The wound was healing, but it was still raw, still there. But Emma was no longer the woman she had been before. She had grown stronger, more resilient. Each day that passed, she found herself rediscovering pieces of herself that she had long forgotten. She no longer looked back at the past with regret, but instead with a quiet acceptance. "I can't change what happened," Emma thought, "but I can control what comes next." The pain of betrayal had taught her hard lessons, but those lessons had brought her closer to the person she was meant to become. She began to look at herself with kindness, something she had never done before. She had spent so long looking for validation outside of herself, but now, she realized that the only validation she needed was her own. Emma smiled softly to herself, knowing that she was no longer waiting for anyone to tell her she was enough. She already knew. One afternoon, while meeting with an old friend, Emma realized just how much she had changed. Her friend had always been supportive, but today she saw something different in Emma. "You look different," her friend remarked, her voice full of surprise. Emma smiled, a deep, genuine smile. "I feel different," she replied. The weight that had been pressing down on her for so long had lifted, and in its place, there was a sense of freedom she had never known before. She was no longer defined by the betrayal by Mark or Lily. She was finally her own person again. It was a revelation, one that filled her with a quiet pride. "I'm not the same woman who walked away from him," Emma thought. She was stronger now, more self-assured, and most importantly, she was free. "I'm not afraid to be myself anymore," she whispered to herself, feeling the weight of those words settle into her heart. One evening, Emma took a walk through the park, the air cool but refreshing. The path was lit by street lamps, their soft light casting long shadows across the ground. As she walked, Emma couldn't help but think about how far she had come. It hadn't been easy, but each step had brought her closer to healing. "I've learned so much about myself," she thought, "about what I deserve, about what I'm capable of." She had learned that she didn't need someone else to complete her. She was whole on her own. Emma paused by a bench and sat down, looking out over the still waters of the small pond in front of her. The silence around her felt peaceful, like a quiet affirmation that everything would be okay. She thought, "I'm no longer waiting for the past to catch up with me. I'm moving forward and I'm doing it on my terms." Time passed, and Emma's life began to settle into a new rhythm. She reconnected with old hobbies, traveled to places she had always dreamed of visiting, and spent time with people who truly valued her. One day, as she was sitting at a cafe, reading a book, she realized that she no longer felt the need to explain herself to anyone. She had spent too much of her life seeking approval, trying to fit into a mold that wasn't meant for her. I don't need anyone's validation, Emma thought, a smile tugging at her lips. I am enough, just as I am. The realization was freeing. It was as if a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. She had stopped seeking approval from others, and in doing so, had finally learned to accept herself fully. Emma was no longer searching for someone to complete her. She had everything she needed right inside her. As Emma stood in front of the mirror one final time, she realized that the journey she had been on was one of self-discovery, growth, and strength. She had come so far from a place of pain and betrayal to a place of inner peace and self-love. I'm proud of who I am now, Emma thought, her heart swelling with gratitude. She had fought through the darkness and had emerged stronger, wiser, and more beautiful than she had ever been. The past doesn't define me, she whispered to herself. I define who I am. With a final glance at her reflection, Emma stepped away from the mirror, ready to embrace the future. She had learned the most important lesson of all, that true healing comes from within, and it starts with accepting who you are, flaws and all. She was free now, truly free, and nothing could hold her back. The days since Emma closed the door on Mark and Lily had been filled with quiet reflection. She no longer clung to the past. Instead, she embraced her journey of growth. The pain had subsided, leaving room for strength and self-love. I've spent too long seeking answers outside of myself, Emma thought, her reflection in the mirror now showing confidence she never saw before. With each passing day, she reclaimed her peace. She smiled softly, realizing she was no longer searching for someone to complete her. She was already whole. The past no longer had power over her. It's time to move forward, she decided, her heart calm, knowing the future was hers to create. Emma met with an old friend at a cafe, and when her friend said, "You look different," Emma finally understood. She had become someone new, not just through the pain but from the strength that came after. I feel different, Emma replied, her voice full of quiet pride. She had stopped second-guessing herself. I'm not the same woman who walked away, she thought. She was stronger now, free of the weight of betrayal, and ready to embrace what lay ahead. Emma had learned that her happiness didn't depend on anyone else. It was hers to own. The future no longer felt uncertain. Emma was in control, and she had never been more sure of who she was. A message from an old acquaintance arrived one evening. Emma's heart skipped, but this time she didn't fear it. She opened the message and smiled, realizing that she had truly moved on. I don't need anyone's validation, she thought, typing a simple, kind reply. She had stopped seeking closure from others. She had found it in herself. I'm okay now, she thought, feeling the weight of the past lift completely. She no longer felt the need to explain herself. It was a victory, not over Mark or Lily, but over herself. I'm free now, Emma whispered, realizing she was no longer defined by her past, but by the strength of the person she had become. Emma walked along the beach, feeling the cool evening breeze. The waves crashed softly nearby, and for the first time in a long while, Emma felt at peace. I've learned to love myself first, she thought, reflecting on her journey. She paused to take in the view, feeling the weight of everything that had happened slowly fade away. The past shaped me, but it no longer defines me, Emma realized. She smiled, knowing she had survived the hardest part. I'm no longer waiting for anyone to fix me, she whispered, the sound of the ocean filling the space around her. Emma had learned that true healing comes from within, and now she was ready to embrace her future. Standing on her balcony, Emma gazed at the city below, feeling a quiet sense of accomplishment. She had come so far, not just from the pain, but from the realization of her own strength. The best is yet to come, Emma thought, a smile curving her lips. She no longer feared the future because she knew she had the power to shape it. She had let go of the past, and now the possibilities were endless. I'm ready for whatever comes next, Emma thought, feeling a surge of hope. The journey wasn't over, but she was finally living it on her terms, stronger, wiser, and more self-assured than ever before.